Yes, we are underway. Hey, everybody, Lee McCroskey here, calling from lovely Nashville, Tennessee. Hope you're doing well. If you've got paper and pencil ready, we're going to explore a topic that is timely and that we've been talking about. And how many of you have read now the QBQ, Question Behind a Question book that was recommended? Okay, Dimitri has. He's still recommending it. Well, I got to hear Jorgen talk about that book the other day, and I thought, wow, what a cool topic to explore a little bit more, maybe from a slightly different angle for sure. So we're going to talk about the power of questions. The power of questions. And I'm going to take bits and pieces out of talks that I used to give. And I have borrowed, if you're a big fan of Tony Robbins, I have borrowed some of the material from him, and I will credit him as always. I always do. I source myself and do bibliographies on my calls. So let's talk a little bit about the power of questions. The one thing over which you've got absolute control are your own thoughts. True? Yes. That is one, and there are many things that are outside of our control. The weather, how our clients react, how sometimes meetings cancel when we don't want them to. There's all kinds of variables, but the one thing that you have absolute control over are your own thoughts. And that puts you in a position to control your destiny, especially in sales. So if you're a note taker, you can write this down. I would write down this. Questions are the answer. That's a big thought. Questions are the answer. Because whatever you ask your brain for, it will give an answer, right? It all comes down to questions. Whatever you look for, you will find. And if you ask a good question, you might get a very resourceful answer. If you ask a terrible question, your brain is like a computer. You get terrible answers back, right? So we're going to talk about some good questions that you can ask and some bad questions that you can ask yourself as you're working along, yeah? One quick story, though. Some of you, you probably don't know, there's a speaker named W. Mitchell, who's a friend of Tony Robbins. And he was this guy who had a terrible accident, and his entire body was completely burned beyond recognition. I mean, he was just torched, but he lived. The thing that made Mitchell very much different than most people in that situation, other than being alive, was that he didn't feel sorry for himself. And he tried to ask very resourceful questions. So imagine you're in a hospital bed, you're completely in pain, your body's wrapped 100% in cloths, and his skin has sort of melted off. His eyelids were kind of destroyed. You can find him online if you want to see what he looked like. But he asked himself some really interesting questions so he would not feel sorry for himself. He asked himself, what do I still have? Now that's an interesting question. And he said this is another question he asked. What am I capable of now, even more so than before? So his brain went in a different direction other than ouch, pain, and man, my life's going to be super different at this point. Well, in the hospital, he ran into a nurse that was taking care of him named Annie. And he decided he was instantly attracted to her, as the story goes. And so instead of just going, well, I'm totally unattractive and this will never work, he asked himself, how can I get a date with this nurse? Which is very bold. That shows a certain degree of confidence, even in that state. And it ended up, short time after that, as they got acquainted, they got married. So, interesting story, but the power of questions, really focus your mind. Ask a terrible question, get a terrible answer. So I want to go through some really bad questions that you may have asked yourself, because these are questions I asked myself when I was selling. And I'll change a few to fit your situation. But here's a big question that doesn't help much. And notice how all these questions, they start with the same word, okay? First question, that's not good, so don't write this down. Why can't I sell like fill in the blank? Why can't I sell like Jorgen? Why can't I sell like Dimitri? Why can't I sell like Chenda? Your brain always gives you an answer. So what's the answer going to be? Because you're not as good, because you're not as capable, because they're really sharp and I'm really not. Okay, now that may not be true at all, but if you've ever studied computer science, who studied computer science? Yes, a couple of you maybe. If you are writing code and you put in a bad command, you type it in, then you put garbage in, you get what? Garbage out. So they have GIGO is what it's called, GIGO. And if your brain is exactly the same way, you put in garbage, you ask it a garbage question, you get the wrong answers. So that's not a good question. Why can't I sell like this person? Not good. All right, here's another one. Why don't people like me in this law firm? If you're struggling with, I know some of you developed an attitude about certain turfs, you know, there's a particular firm or company that you're calling on and it's not going well. And like, why don't they like me? And your brain will give you an answer because you're not likable. And your brain, you go, oh yeah, that's right. I forgot. Okay, good. Not a good question. Here's another one. Why do I, this is when you're really frustrated. You ask, why do I always screw things up? Has anybody ever asked that? Not a good question. Please don't ask yourself that, because your brain comes back and says, well, you always screw things up because you've always screwed things up and you will continue to screw things up. Good luck. Have a nice life. All right. You might think, why can't I get in any qualified bookings? This is a crappy week. Not a good question. Let me give you some more. Why doesn't anybody like me? Here's one, if you're really out of it. I've talked to many salespeople over the years that I've met with them on meetings, and they would say, why am I so depressed? You just get in a horrible loop there. Why am I so depressed? Well, because I'm depressed. That's why I'm so depressed, and it's terrible. Here's another one. Why can't I get past secretaries? Why can't I get, then your brain gives you a crap answer. Or why do my appointments always cancel? So what do all those questions that are not good start with? Why? Yes? I heard you all murmur that even though you're muted. So those are a series of not good questions. Now, why questions are okay if we're sitting down and talking about why am I working here? And you're asking like purpose questions or personal mission questions. Then exploring the why is okay. But if you're in a bad mental state, to sit around and ask why it's happening to you, I've heard people come up with really weird answers when they were struggling in sales. Like, why do I suck at this? And then they just start, and I asked them, well, what do you think? And they go, well, when I was potty trained, when I was 2 years old, my mom, I'm like, well, what? What are you talking about? So they can come up with some pretty weird stuff. So let's try different types of questions. How about, here's some good questions you can ask. Notice what these start with. How can I turn this around? New starter word. How can I turn this around? Or variation on the theme. How can I learn from this encounter with my client? You've all had a real weird sort of uncomfortable experience with a particular client, yeah? Well, instead of just walking out going, what a jerk. Why is he such a bonehead or whatever? You guys use different terminology than I do. But if you've been upset with the client, change the question. How can I learn from this encounter? Or what was he here to teach me? Now that is a useful thought because your brain doesn't naturally go there, but it's really smart to think that way. Okay, let me give you another one. I'm filling you with good questions. Here's one. How can I change my mental state so that I'm feeling empowered? That is a good question. If you're just like gnashing your teeth and sitting down and going, oh, 3 appointments canceled, so I just need to go floating today. Before you start that, ask yourself, how can I change my mental state so I'm feeling confident and empowered and people want to be with me? That is a good question. Here's another question. What can I learn from this situation? That was a question that helped me so much. It was unbelievable when I was selling and frustrated. What can I learn from this situation? Or how can I use this situation? Okay, Good. You're getting the pattern here, I take it. Yeah? Here's another one. This is simple. How can I improve? How can I improve? Pretty simple stuff. Because your brain gets stuck in a loop. It's like, this isn't fun. I'm not good at it. Why am I not good at it? And you get stuck in this eternal loop of death, so mentally. So what you can do then is ask a how question. How can I learn from this? How can I change the situation? How can I improve? And your brain goes, boop, 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 jumps over to an entirely new zone. You know, when I was talking with people who were stuck mentally, I would hold a number of personal conferences with them on weekend meetings. And when we talked, they would just be going, oh, everything's bad. I hate my life. And why is this happening to me? And I would finally just say, stop, time out. What do you want to happen? And they're like, what? They never thought what they wanted to happen. They were just wallowing in what was currently happening that was not fun. So a great question to get unstuck is, what do I want to happen? That's a good question. Your brain explores new avenues, okay? And if you've ever walked out of a sales situation and you've been just completely pissed off, if you're angry, I remember saying this through like where I really blew the sale or messed up the close, and I was so close and I remember walking out thinking, how can I learn from this problem so this will never happen again? That's a good question, said with emotion. How can I learn from this problem so this will never happen again? And a much more calming question might be, how do I want to feel about myself and what I do all day long? How do I want to feel about myself? I want to feel confident. I want to feel professional. I want to have status. I want to use the right tone. That's what you want to be thinking, right? Not all this other garbage. So first little part here comes down to good questions and bad questions. If you're having a tough time, don't get into the bad question side of things, right? So, and I know Jorgen covered a good bit about question behind a question, but when I went back into my old notes, I found some good stuff on questions that talked about what questions do in a sales situation. So let me just throw out a few of these, and they may overlap with what Jorgen talked about and what Dimitri's covered, but it's still good stuff. Questions help, and there's, I think, 7 of them. Questions help you respect your client's opinions. They help you respect your client's opinions. Okay? Good. Second one, questions help you find out what he's thinking or she's thinking, depending on who you're calling on. They help you find out what he's thinking. Third thing, they help you crystallize his ideas. They help him focus, which is definitely what you want. You want to be in control in the situation, right? Questions, focus, definitely. And let me take just a little rabbit trail here. You know, one question that I always tried to ask people when I was selling, and if I mutated it for LGFG, you may not write this down because I'm not authorized to teach anything sales technique-y, but there was a book I read called How to Double Your Sales by Asking a Few More Questions. Nice little book. And it was literally it was to try to get the prospect to a what he called a feeling level, because if people got to a feeling level, then they were much more apt to be sold, and they were certainly, you found their go button, in other words. So a good question I would think would be, what's most important when it comes to your getting a new suit? Like, what do you value most? To me, that would be an interesting question. And then, regardless of what he said, I would follow up and say, well, a lot of the lawyers here have told me that, but why is that important to you? Because a lot of times people give you the easy answer first, and you're not digging down to find the good stuff underneath the emotional stuff. So we may talk about that sometime, but that's just a thought. If that violates all of your rules, I don't want to mess up your script, then disregard that completely. But let's keep going. The fourth thing it does, questions establish rapport. They establish rapport if you ask good questions. Fifth, anybody gotten in an argument with a client? Yes, you have. Well, questions help you avoid arguments. And if things are getting heated, you can just say, hey, Steve, let me ask you a question. And it's like, whoop, he suddenly's like, okay. And you're back in control. So it avoids arguments. And then next, questions help with trial closes. It helps you take the temperature of the client. Like, how's this look so far? How am I doing? I don't know. Those are little tiny temperature takers, and they're probably built into your sales script already, but nonetheless, questions are good for that. And then finally, questions make him, your client, feel important. Okay? So let me give you one more little set of questions that I found useful. And I want to tell you, if you've read Tony Robbins' book, Awaken the Giant Within, great book, but it's kind of thick. It may have been a little bit daunting to pick that thing up. So what I did was I also got a shorter version called Giant Steps. Look how little it is. Oh, how fun. This is my type of reading. These little tiny little chapters. And they're very short, but I wanted to share his problem-solving questions with you, okay? So let me share. These are good. I use these for years. Problem-solving questions. So if you get stuck, here's some questions to think about, all right? Number one, and this is very counterintuitive. Number one, what is great about this problem? And your brain goes, oh, nothing. And if your brain answers nothing, then put in the modal could. What could be great about this problem? Well, I guess I'm learning something. Okay. So insert could if your brain doesn't give you a good answer. We'll talk more about that in a future call. So what's great about this problem? Number two, problem-solving question. This is weird. What's not perfect yet? Okay. That gives you kind of a new zone to think about. What's not perfect yet? Wow. I can think of a lot of things. But your brain starts exploring new territory. What's not perfect yet? Number three, this is a good one. What am I willing to do to make it the way I want it? What am I willing to do to make it the way I want it? That could be your career. That could be your sales this particular month. What am I willing to do to make it the way I want it? That's interesting. I like that question. Here's another one. The opposite of that. What am I no longer willing to do in order to make it the way I want it? In other words, what do I have to stop? What do I have to stop doing to make it the way I want it? That is a good question. Because sometimes we just go through like the buffet line of life, and we just start taking this stuff. Well, I'll have one of those, and I'll have one of these, and I'll add one of this, and I'll take one of this. And if you keep adding stuff to your life or your sales script or whatever, sometimes you have to go, hold it, time out. What do I need to stop doing? This is very complex. What do I need to let go of to make it the way I want it? Okay. And the final question, and I will finish with this, is how can I enjoy the process while I'm making these changes? How can I enjoy the process while I'm making these changes? Isn't that good? Because it's not just about, some of us make mistakes because we have these really strong goals. Like this month, I want to hit 40K, or this month, I'm going to hit 50. And so you condition your mind to think, well, when I hit 40K, then I'll be happy. Okay? So you're kind of unhappy or confused or whatever state, clear up until you maybe hit the goal. And when you do, then you're like, yes, I'm happy. But that's not, that's all future tense. So think about the now. How can I enjoy this process? And you're like, well, this is really hard. I'm just starting off. I'm not very good at it. I know. But how can I enjoy the process? How can I catch myself doing something right? That is a great question. It's not even on my list. How can I catch myself doing something right? Because what are we really good at? You're right. Catching yourself doing things wrong. You walk out and you go, oh, I messed that up. I should have said that. I should have done this. If I only would have. Okay, great. That's all good. But what did I do well? What a wonderful question to ask yourself at the end of each evening after work as you're heading home. What did I do well today? catch yourself doing something right. Okay. So this is all about the power of questions. Questions help you focus. Questions redirect your mind. Questions will help you change your attitude in an instant. But you have to be asking yourself, first, you got to be aware of what kind of questions are rolling around in your head. And then second, you have to kind of eject some of them like an old bad CD and put in a new one, right? For those of you that use CDs still. I was going to say cassette tapes or 8-tracks, but that would have really been archaic. So anyway, you get the idea. Okie doke. So any comments? Let me look in my little set of windows here and see if anybody unmutes at this point. Anybody? Yes, please unmute if you need to comment.
Hey Lee, Dimitri's hand here. How are you doing?
It's a great hand.
Excellent. All right, I can turn this to myself. So first of all, thank you for covering this book. I want to share. Hello, can you guys see me? There I am. That is my favorite book of all time.
Yeah.
And I've read, at least a dozen books. So this is definitely the best book, my favorite book ever. QBQ, The Question Behind the Question. Check it out. I read it and I bought 15 copies the first time I read it, and I gave it to all my friends and was immediately disowned by half of them because they realized that there was a message in there they needed to read and they didn't want to hear it from me. But I do have a question that I ask myself, and I want you guys to ask yourself this question if you can. These are all amazing questions. One question I really love to ask myself is, why not me? Why not me? It's probably my favorite. I had a call about this a year or two ago, but why not me? And, and for me, the realization of my potential was when I was not what you would call a top salesperson, at least not objectively. So therefore, and we had gone on a trip in a company in Mexico. Remember that? And, this girl walked into the room and she was just, I don't know if she was inebriated or something, but she was acting and talking very foolishly, in my humble opinion. And I walked out of that room thinking like, man, what an idiot. Who is this person? And then I realized like a minute later, this was like the number 1 or 2 first-year salesperson in the whole company.
Yes.
Like just, but without knowing that, I could just objectively kind of see the situation. And right there, I thought to myself, man, if she can be number 1 or number 2 in the company, really, why not me?
It's good.
So it's kind of that relative example. And, and so for me, like, when I see somebody like, for example, I think of Chenda, who's, I don't know, he's probably at close to 90,000 this month, and we're only halfway through the month. And if you're not Chenda right now, it's a good question to ask, like, why not me?
Mm-hmm.
Like, and you guys don't realize the potential, I think, sometimes, because Chenda's not, there's nothing, most successful people, when you think about why not me, are just super boring. And when you like, and again, I kind of going in a little bit of that direction, but these questions are so powerful for me. But, like when you meet somebody that could be like super charming, engaging, amazing, and you think the world of them, you often then learn later they're just fake. Like that's not the real, you guys had that experience? Like they're like so engaging and you're like, oh, this person's great. And then you actually get to know them. It's like, no, that's all fake. That's completely fake. That's just like that's just what they want you to think about them. And it's not the true self. It's a lie. It's phony. And most of that is phony. And then when you meet really successful, like, you go to your client, and what you realize about your clients is that they're not super crazy out there, charming, engaging, ridiculous people. They're just people that show up and ask the right questions. They're usually kind of boring. And success, Darren Hardy would say, success is not glamorous. There's nothing glamorous about it. It's just the daily grind, and it's usually kind of boring. And so when you realize that, and like that question is like right away, like, why not me? And so that's a question I ask myself all the time when I see somebody. I used to look at, as some of you guys do this too, like you drive through a really rich neighborhood and look at the house. Does anybody ever do that, by the way? It's very inspirational. Mark Cuban used to do that. So then I used to do that. And then I'd look at that gigantic house and go, why not me? Or I see something I want, I say, why not me? So question for you guys, why not you? All right, that's it. That's me.
That's good. That's excellent. And a great finish to our topic. So I wanted to tell you next week as I wrap up, I am leaving for Barcelona on Thursday and doing some kind of cruise. My daughter's studying over there. So next week I'll be in the Mediterranean somewhere. So I will attempt to do a kind of a Zoom recording that I can send Mamik, and he'll distribute to everybody. Will that work, Mamik? Nod your head. Yeah, so that will cover that week. And then I get back on Easter, and I'm not sure how the holidays work for you, April 1st or 2nd, but I will be hopefully prepared to pull something out on the 2nd, that Monday. So if everybody's going to be out of the office, I don't know how you guys celebrate Easter, or if you do where you are, but drop me a note and I'll be ready for that. But this next one won't be live. I know that really hurts you because some of you like to participate heavily in our calls, and so, but it'll be kind of a one-way monologue as you're used to, but it'll be coming to you next week. I'll record it the next few days. Okie doke. So that's it for this week. Keep asking good questions, and remember that the one thing you have absolute control over are your own thoughts, and your own thoughts are the result of the questions you ask in your life. So next week will be much deeper questions for you to ponder, but they're good ones. Okie doke. That's all. Lee McCroskey signing off. See y'all. Thank you. Have a great